So we are going to go back to the Songs of Ascent, and it's amazing how many of them have been quoted during the prayer times and things like that. Often something from these psalms. So, in the last talk, we looked at the chiastic nature of the structure of the Songs of Ascent. Also, many of the psalms themselves, the individual psalms, are chiastic in structure. We're not going to look at each individual one. I wish we had the time, but we don't. Today, we're going to have a little bit more of a look at the progressive nature through the psalms. And on the first evening, we thought, didn't we, about a didactic poem that was also a love song, and the way how marvelously the Lord can bring those two things, those two extremes together, a teaching document and a love song. He can make a love song so rich that it can have wisdom for us and instruct us, as that psalm does. And we heard Fraser earlier, and I must say, Fraser, you are a wonderful storyteller. I could have sat there all day and just listened to you go right through Exodus and the rest of it. Yeah, and this idea of narrative. And also there are chiasmic structures in narratives in the Old Testament. So if you were to think, we looked at Noah's flood, didn't we? There are many examples. Tower of Babel is another one. And Jacob and Jabbok, that's another one, going down to the brook and wrestling and having his name changed. In the middle of that chiasm, that X moment, which makes the sea change in a person's life. And from then on, he limped, but he had a different name. These things are wonderful. Now, we can look at this like rich literature, as if an author sat down, a clever author sat down, and thought, I'm going to make this a chiastic structure. But actually, these are real people. These were real things. These are just accounts of real things that happened in real people's lives in real time. So we have narrative, which is didactic. It means it's instructive. We could have just listened to Fraser just tell the story, and we were instructed without him saying anything else, or at least I felt instructed. It's didactic, it's a story, and they're real lives. So somehow the Lord has brought together narrative and reality. But I would suggest we are all didactic narratives, each one. And you say, how? Well, we know that our times and our deeds are being written down. We all know that, don't we? We have a heavenly biographer. Now, I've used this story at our fellowship. Imagine you had an aunt that you were asked to visit, and you didn't really want to go and see her, but you didn't know her very well, but because of family pressure, I'll visit her, don't worry. And you go around, and like with all of these things, you have a lovely time, you have a cup of tea and have a really good talk. And you say, and you feel good about yourself because you're going to say, you say to her, well, perhaps we can meet this time next week, and you're feeling like you're doing her a favor. And she turns around and says to you, I'm sorry, I can't do next week. I'm talking to my biographer. Your biographer? You mean you've had a life so important that someone else is going to write about it? And suddenly this aunt becomes a very interesting person. But we don't realize that our lives are didactic narratives. Now, how many times today in conversations have you said something like, oh, I knew someone and they had a very similar experience, but it was a bit different because of, or, oh, my nephew did this the other day, and so we're using each other's stories all the time to instruct. Now, how many times do you think people have said that of you in conversations? Your story has been told thousands of times in your lifetime and used for instruction. Your living, breathing life experience is a didactic narrative. And it's sobering, isn't it? And it doesn't matter whether you might make the right choices or the wrong choices. All that means is you are either an inspiring story or you're a salutary lesson. You will be a narrative. We can't get away from it, friends. And we are people of narrative, aren't we? So whether we have an earthly biographer doesn't really matter in the end. It's being written down. It's being recorded. Because it's significant. Everything is significant. More significant than we know. Your thoughts are significant and known. Everything we do is significant, more than we know, even the insignificant things, because we don't see the other side. We don't see the heavenly side. We'll understand one day. But there's something going on with humans that teaches heaven, teaches the angels, in one sense. We are instructive narratives who are living, breathing, living in the world. Now, I am not, let me just qualify this, I'm not a Calvinist. I'm not saying that we don't have any free will. We do have free will and agency. But there is sovereignty. And somehow the Lord brings it all together in some magnificent way. But anyway, so that is the first thought. Our story has been recounted thousands of times by other humans that we know already in our lives, let alone our story in heaven, in those books. So let's have a look then at the progressive nature of the Songs of Ascent. So I did send a slide to Hannah. Hopefully we can get this up. The first one I sent. That's the one. Now, what? Hmm?
We're not using it. Oh, right, okay. Oh, it's in terms. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Something didn't want us to see this, but so it's obviously important. Now, I do want to put a rider on this. Okay, this was me going through the Psalms and just bringing out the narrative that I felt went with the grain. So don't take this as gospel, but I think there is something here for us. So in Psalm 120. We have the initial instinct to turn to God. So we could have a quick look at the Psalm 120, so short, so we can read it. In my distress, I cried to the Lord, and he heard me. Deliver my soul, O Lord, from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue. What shall be given to you, or what shall be done to you, you false tongue? Sharp arrows of the warrior with coals of the broom tree. Woe is me that I dwell in Meshech, that I dwell among the tents of Kedar. My soul has dwelt too long with one who hates peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. So here we have a person who has suddenly, in a way, come to their senses. I think about the son, who there he is feeding the pigs, and it says he comes to his senses. He's far away. He's dwelling with people who are lying to him. He's nomadic. He's living in tents, and and he's in distress. And I mean, how many of you came to the Lord in those sorts of circumstances? You perhaps came to a point in your life where you were in distress, and you turned to the Lord, or a point where you realized that everything around you, the world, was built on a lie. And this is another thing. I've had enough of lying lips. I want truth. And this is an initial realization, really. Woe is me that I dwell in Meshech. And so there's this idea that I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. I'm far away. And this was the starting point for people singing when they were going to go up on pilgrimage. And it's a good place, isn't it? Perhaps you're coming away to a conference like this, and you've been buried under work and all of that, and family's going on, and you just feel cold spiritually. You feel far away, and this psalm it just starts you on the journey. I want to get back. So here's the initial instinct to turn back, and this, in a lot of ways, this psalm is unresolved. You look at the end, and it says, "I'm for peace, but they're for war." But there's no real answer. And we're going to come back to verse 4, which says, "Sharp arrows of the warrior with coals of a broom tree." Can you remember perhaps where arrows are mentioned elsewhere in the Songs of Ascent? And we'll come back to that. So, next psalm. Turning to God and knowing his help. I will lift up my eyes to the hills. From whence comes my help? My help comes from the Lord, who made heavens and earth. So he looks to the highest point that he can see on this earth, and he has to look further because he doesn't see any help there. He has to look further up to the one who made those very hills. That's where my help comes from. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. There's a realization that the Lord is the one who's going to look after the psalmist. At the end, the last verse, the Lord will preserve your going out and your coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. What a wonderful place to get to. It's been a very personal experience so far. And then we get to the next one, Psalm 122. I was glad when they said to me, "Let us go to the house of the Lord." So you can imagine this person. They've had a realization that they need to turn. They've looked to the Lord for help, and they've had an experience of the Lord. And then perhaps they start on a road towards the right place. I'm going to go home. And they meet some others on the road. How glad would you feel? And there's something of that here, isn't there? I was glad when they said to me, "Let's go to the house of the Lord." Now, there's something, this next verse kind of defeats my narrative a little bit. Our feet are standing in your gates, O Jerusalem. Well, in my narrative, they're not there yet. But you can say, well, it's almost like we're there because we're together, That's the way I get around it anyway. We're going to zip through for the sake of the narrative. So you may be a new Christian, you may have found some fellowship, but there's going to be opposition. And here we have Psalm 1, 2, 3. Unto you I lift up my eyes. We've learned to do that, haven't we, in the second one of these Psalms. O you who dwell in the heavens, behold, as the eyes of your servants look to the hand of their masters, as the eyes of a maid to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God until he has mercy on us. Have mercy on us, O Lord, have mercy on us, for we are exceedingly filled with contempt. There's people who hold them in contempt. What on earth are you doing? Come back to the tents. Where are you going? Our soul is exceedingly filled with scorn, of the scorn of those who are at ease. It's all of this religion stuff. Just sit down and watch the telly. Why are you going to church? With the contempt of the proud. And it's usually the proud who pour scorn on others, is it not? So there's opposition here. Experience opposition. Does anyone recognize this sort of shape in their own life? Yeah. Having a testimony of being helped. Psalm 124. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, let Israel now say, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, when men rose up against us, then we would have been swallowed alive. And here we have now someone who's trusted the Lord through opposition, and they've got a testimony. They've got a good testimony of being helped by the Lord. What a wonderful thing it is. And then we go on to 125. Those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be moved, but abides forever. So these people are starting to be established in their faith. So it's trials, isn't it? It's trusting the Lord and going through trials with the Lord, which establishes us more and more. We realize we can trust in it. And they're saying, well, you're like a mountain. You're like the mountains that surround Jerusalem. What a wonderful picture. What a wonderful thing. Let's go on. And this next one is one of my favorite Psalms because this was read at my wedding. And I'll explain afterwards, but let's read the Psalm, the whole of this Psalm, because I like this one particularly. When the Lord brought back the captivity of Zion, we were like those who dream. Our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with singing. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are glad. Bring back our captivity, O Lord, as the streams in the south. Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. Those who continually go forth weeping, bearing seed for sowing, shall doubtless come back with rejoicing, bringing their sheaves with him. What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful psalm. Rachel and I met, we were 18, 19, and we got to know each other, and we started going out with each other in our early 20s. We didn't actually get married until I was 28, because of various things that happened, and it was it was very agonizing for us. It was very agonizing for our friends as well. I don't know how much you were aware of it, Josh.
A little bit. Talking about you a lot.
Yeah.
praying for you a little bit.
It's that didactic narrative, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, but when the wedding came finally, we had definitely sown in tears over the whole thing, and we were coming in such joy. And this psalm was the thing. This was the one that really it was read by lovely Sue Tet. But anyway, so we have, after trouble and arriving somewhere, we've arrived somewhere. And this is why the progressive structure and the chiastic structure meet, because we're arriving in Psalm 127. We've got there. And the Psalms following in the narrative, I would suggest, are from the place that we've landed at, from Jerusalem. So let's read 127. Now, it's obviously we're going to settle in Jerusalem. We're not just coming here for a feast. We're going to build a house. And here we have it. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early. It is vain for you to sit up late to eat the bread of sorrows. For so he gives his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with their enemies in the gates. And so we have a principle laid down here. So perhaps you have got somewhere in your spiritual walk and you've arrived at the crux point of your faith. You know, you feel like the Lord has really done something with you. And you're in the place the Lord wants you to be. Well, it doesn't necessarily follow that everything's going to, flow from that. We've got to remember, only the Lord can build the house from now on. We may have been given a ministry, or we may have been given a responsibility, or whatever it is. That doesn't mean anything unless we allow the Lord to build the house. So the next psalm, we are in the land and we are building a house. So Psalm 128. Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. When you eat the labor of your hands, you shall be happy, and it shall be well with you. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine in the very heart of your house, your children like olive plants all around the table. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. The Lord bless you out of Zion, and may you see the good of Jerusalem all the days of your life. Yes, may you see your children's children. Peace be upon Israel. So this is a blessing for someone who wants to establish a household, isn't it? And the advice is fear the Lord. So we've heard that the Lord must build the house. So build the house, but fear the Lord. Build it under him. And now again, we face trouble. Trouble's not very far away. So we have attacks. I put attacks in the land. You may disagree with this, but let's read the psalm. A Song of Ascent, 129. Many a time they have afflicted me from my youth. Let Israel now say, many a time they have afflicted me from my youth. Yet they have not prevailed against me. The plowers plowed on my back. That must be painful. They made their furrows long. You ever felt like that? Someone's walking all over you. Not only are they walking over you, but they've made their furrows long. It's hard dealing with people sometimes, isn't it? The Lord is righteous. He has cut in pieces the cords of the wicked. Let all those who hate Zion be put to shame and turn back. Let them be as grass on the housetops, which withers before it grows up. This is the very opposite of the fruitful vine in the household in the last psalm. The last psalm was let's be fruitful, and in this psalm, let our enemies not be fruitful. Let them be like grass which withers away. On it, it's on a rooftop. So we're experiencing opposition, and then the next psalm attacks again, but this time of my own guilt. Now, I've had this where I've been given responsibility or had some kind of position or whatever it is, and I just feel like I've made a complete mess of the whole thing. And I've done this wrong, I've done that wrong, and you get to a point where you realize, well, the Lord didn't give me this position for my talents or for anything in me at all. And this needs to happen, does it not? Let's read a little bit of Psalm 130. And this is what guilt does to us. Out of the depths I have cried to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. And we know it's guilt because of this next verse. If you, Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, that you may be feared. There's forgiveness with God, that he may be feared. Do I fear the one who forgives me? Well, if I know the judge has power, if I know the judge has all power, then if he forgives me, I'm forgiven. If I don't fear him, forgiveness is kind of, do you see what I mean? The authority of God gives authority to his forgiveness. So if we respect his authority, we know we're forgiven. Do you understand? So there's a correlation between fearing him and being forgiven by him. I wait for the Lord. My soul waits, and in his word do I hope. My soul waits for the Lord more than those who watch for the morning. Yes, more than those who watch for the morning. Now, I don't know if you have an idea of what that means. Could be to do with watchmen. I wonder whether there's a bigger view. If you think of all the people and in the world, there's a certain proportion of people in the world who are now asleep, and you may wish to be one. But there's a certain proportion of people now in the world who are trying to sleep and are not able, and they're just longing for morning to come. Have you ever had that? You're having a horrible night, and maybe you're tortured by something, you're just longing for the morning. And there's a certain amount of people in that position in the world right now. And he's saying, I wait for the Lord more than even them. It's a wonderful thing. Let's go on. Reaching a place of humility and so peace. Psalm 131. This one's my favourite psalm as well. Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor my eyes lofty, neither do I concern myself with great matters, nor with things too profound for me. Surely I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with his mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forever. What a wonderful place to reach. And does it not say in the last one, we were just thinking about it, I wait for the Lord, I'm waiting for him. And here we reach a place of peace. And David wrote this one. You may think this is a cop-out. Sometimes people come with questions, and I don't concern myself with things too high for me. Maybe it's a cop-out, but actually there are certain things. I would say sometimes things like we might have mentioned before, free will and sovereignty. There are people right now wrestling with free will and sovereignty. Well, the Jews never wrestled with free will and sovereignty. What is the deal? I mean, I'll tell you the way I put it together because it's the right way. I'm joking. The Bible tells me that I have free will. Choose this day. The Bible tells me that God is sovereign. That's it. That's it. That's it. It's a miracle. Yeah, solved. And then this remarkable psalm, this is the longest one, Psalm 132. We're going to come back to this one. But praying according to God's will, my desires in line with his. And actually, we find that there are certain things asked in the first part of the psalm which are answered in the second part of the psalm. But we'll come back to that. But there is the way he is praying, he says, remember your servant David. Remember what he said, Lord? And you think about the way we've been praying. Lord, you said in your word this. You said in your word that. He's learned something about how to pray to the Lord. Then in 133, I've got to keep an eye on the time. Josh said I could go over an hour, so that's fine. But I'm joking again. 133, in some ways, one of the most mysterious psalms, but in some ways, we all understand it. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It is like the precious oil upon the head, running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the edge of his garments. It is like the dew of Hermon, descending upon the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, life forevermore. There, where? A geographical place? Well, or something about his people, in his will, being like life forevermore. Life, imagine your family, everyone's on top form, no one's miserable. You're on a trip or something and it's wonderful. Everyone's on the best form and you're having a wonderful time. There's no fly in the ointment. Well, we are going to be who we're really supposed to be. I mean, we have so many, even the most spiritual of us still have hang-ups and we have problems in our heart, whatever it is. We're going to be exactly who the Lord made us to be. And we will fit with each other in fellowship in such an amazing way. Life forevermore. Anyway, a picture of heaven. Then, lastly, and this really is the end of the journey. We've gone from dwelling in tents to coming right to the house. Behold, bless the Lord, all you servants of the Lord, who by night stand in the house of the Lord. Lift up your hands in the sanctuary and bless the Lord who made heaven and earth. Bless you from Zion. He is able to invite the servants to come. He is so in the core of things that he's there at night and he's the one inviting. What a wonderful thing. To stand by night is not necessarily very comfortable, is it? And yet that's where he has us at the end of this narrative. Can we have a quick look at the next slide? I'm conscious of time. I want to have a look at the personal development of this fictional person, because they're different psalms written at different times, but it gives us a sense of the narrative. We have a lot of I in the first one. Then we have I, my, Israel, and you as the reader in the second one. Then we have I again, and then our feet are standing. Now, this is not exhaustive, so don't, but you'll probably find other things in the Psalms, and I encourage you to do that. I, us, we, then Psalm 124, our, Israel, we. And those, they, Israel, we, our. The I is starting to get less and less. The Lord, he, that's 127. Then you, the reader, your, the readers, and Israel. My and me. Now, the next three, if we can scroll down a little bit, if that's possible. I would say, if we can scroll up, these show a progression in prayer. So Psalm 130, we have this out of the depths. I'm crying to you, Lord. I'm in a crisis. But he gets to the point of waiting. And then we have Psalm 131, where he is at peace. He's found that place before the Lord where he's not haughty, he's content. His soul is like a weaned child. He's in the Lord's will. And then we have 132, where the prayer is saying, Lord, remember David. Remember what he said, Lord. And then we have, I'll point out just a few of them. In verse 8, it says, now this is Psalm 132. Sorry if I'm moving too fast, but there's a lot to get through. Psalm 132, verse 8 says, arise, O Lord, to your resting place. And then if you look down at Psalm 14, here is the divine answer. This is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, for I have desired it. Did you see there's a prayer and answer? And then the next verse from 8, 9, obviously. Let your priests be clothed with righteousness, and let your saints shout for joy. Verse 16. I will clothe her, priests, with salvation, and her saints shall shout aloud for joy. So we have roughly a prayer in the first half of the psalm, and then the divine answer in the second half of the psalm. This person has learned to pray. What a wonderful thing. And then Psalm 133 is really to any who care to observe. That's the one about the brethren dwelling in unity. And then 134, he's got to such a place that he can invite the servants of the Lord to come. So we're going to finish very soon. We're just going to take a very quick look now at the nub of the matter, which is Psalm 127. And we will finish with these things. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. And then verse 2, is vain for you to rise up early. And you remember this, don't you? Remember from the last time we talked about this. A good example of this would be Saul, who when they were chasing the Philistines, he said, right, none of you are going to eat anything until you've avenged me of my enemies. You know, he put a vain fasting on them. And then he got into all kinds of trouble with his son Jonathan taking some honey because he didn't realize, and then he's made a promise to destroy him, and then he couldn't keep his promise before the Lord because of the people, and that was right, but now he's broken a promise to the Lord. It got him in all kinds of, and do you remember the word vain means destructive? It was destructive, a fleshly thing. But we remember also, in contrast, that beloved means David. And we remember that Psalm 51, the sacrifices that the Lord desires. We prayed this, didn't we? Broken and contrite spirit. That's what he wants. And if that includes fasting, great. I'm not telling you not to fast, friends. I'm just saying don't do it in vain. Don't try and manipulate God with it. Anyway, as we said that already. In the first half of this psalm, we have the building of the house of God, and the city with the watchman. In the second half, we have the household. And we're going to finish with this. I remember reading this psalm when I was a younger man. I had 2 children, a pretty perfect girl and a pretty perfect boy. And everything was pretty perfect. And we were there at Christmas, and me and Rachel kind of made some plans. Perhaps we'll have 4 children because, we're going out there with 4 children. And but I was having doubts. I remember sitting there reading this. Before I read this, I was thinking, we can stop at 2. We've got our girl and boy. That's what most people want. They fit in the car. We can, and it won't be that long before we can leave them at home and go on holiday together again without them. And all of these things. And while I was having these thoughts, I was reading this psalm. Can you believe it? And I came across verse 3. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is your reward. And I stopped and I thought, God, my attitude is completely different to this. I'm thinking children are an inconvenience. God is telling me children are a blessing. And hence 6 children later. 6 children in all, not 8, but could have been 8. So, friends, our attitude's wrong towards children in this country. It is wrong. We're too selfish. We don't want to sacrifice for our children. We don't want the trouble. We want our careers, we want our fun, we want all of these things. We don't want to lay down our lives. And this is partly where all of this abortion stuff has come from, that we've been praying about, isn't it? Like arrows in the hand of a warrior. Do you remember I mentioned arrows? Okay. In Psalm 120 it said, about the false tongue, what shall you give the false tongue? Sharp arrows of a warrior. With coals of the broom tree. Apparently broom tree roots make the hottest coals. And it says sharp arrows. You've got to be very sharp to deal with the lying tongue in others and oneself. Have you ever had an important letter sitting on the side and someone phones you about it and you say, oh, it's in the post? Ever done that? Have you ever exaggerated at all? It's very easy to let our tongue, begin to get a bit deceptive. We need to be very sharp with our tongues. But what do we do when there are lies all around us, where everyone's being taught lies? Well, have children and tell them the truth. That's what we do with the lying tongue. We have children and we tell them the truth. And this is the basis for the rest of it. When you meet your enemies at the gate, you've had children and they've learnt the truth so they can deal with them. Happy is the man whose quiver for, and that word happy is the same as Psalm 1, blessed is the man. It's the same word. Happy, blessed. Very last scripture, and it's not a Song of Ascent. It's Psalm 112. Because we've been talking about children. I just want to mention this. Well, let's read from the first verse. Praise the Lord, blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who delights greatly in his commandments. His descendants will be mighty in the land. Friends, we need to pray for this. We need to pray that the young adults get married and have lots of children and teach them the truth. We need to pray that many Christian young adults get married, have lots of children, and teach them the truth. This is the way to deal with the rot, the lies in our society. Not the only way, of course, but this is a way. The Lord building the house. we've built in vain. Let's start building rightly, shall we? Amen.
Amen.